part 2. My thumb hit the stop button, so here we are, part 2. Okay, so this is the garden bed that I was sitting on. There's our house on our patio. You see it runs all along the south side. So that's a really cool place to grow like winter vegetables, and I don't know, I just plant different things. I've got a bunch of succulents in there right now because it is blazing hot here in the summer. So in a more temperate climate, that microclimate garden bed right there, built up against the side of the house in bricks, would be a really sweet spot for things like tomatoes and peppers and eggplant that don't really do that well in a temperate climate. But since I'm not in a temperate climate, they would fry there. So we're still learning, you know, because I am from a temperate climate, and that's not what's going on here. So here's, you can sort of see the ditch. Okay, so right along the edge, and we're just coming out of winter here, and it's been raining like crazy for a week. So everything's really moist, and during that week that it's been raining, I haven't been doing any weeding. So you'll see it's really weedy out here, but it's kind of cool to see it, and it's mulched, and it's blustery, and it's ready for that spring infusion of work that happens in the garden. It's so much fun, right? Okay, so we're coming to the ditch. To the entry point. So source to sink. So this is our water source. It's actually not. This is our secondary water source. I'll show you. So you can see this little ditch here. Okay, and there's this little gate here that moves. I'm not going to pull it out right now. There's a few of them around, and it's built in concrete, and there's these concrete tubes that go all through the entire village. And there's one that comes into our place. And that thing, when it is on, it shoots water really at a very high pressure into our landscape. And then it shoots down right along the edge of that garden bed that I was talking about. And then you can see behind me into the garden. So all through the garden, hopefully I can show you this. Okay, so all through the garden, we have sculpted on contour. We have just dug these very shallow ditches. And I did not use a shovel. I used a hoe, a really wide, just a big fat hoe. And I used that to sculpt these little acequias all through the garden. So you can sort of see how it kind of looks like we're using raised beds, but it's actually sunken waterways. And we're using the raised part are the beds, but they're not very high. If they were higher, it wouldn't work because they wouldn't get enough water. So the soil is really, really sandy, and the water percolates very quickly here. And the water also runs across it very quickly because it doesn't get watered that much, and it's dry. So, you know, like when you have a houseplant, you haven't watered in a while, and then you put the water on it, and it just goes right through it. So that's what happens here on our land. And our site is also situated a tiny bit higher than the next lower site. We're actually quite a bit higher than the neighbors right there. And they get the water after us. So if water runs across our land really quickly without percolating in, then this shared community well, so we have a ration once a week or a couple times a week, it depends on how much we arrange, the water comes rushing in. And it's not cheap. We have to pay, and everybody gets an allotted ration, and if you want more, you have to pay. And so it's important that we're efficient with the water when it comes in. And so what we've done is, if it just came in from the source right there, and let's say we had a ditch that just went straight downhill. If we wanted the water to leave, we would build a ditch that just went straight downhill, and it would just go straight to the neighbors. But if we want the water to stay, then we build this intricate labyrinth. So you can see where the plants are, and right now we have all of the gardens are planted. Everything looks really good in the garden right now. So if you're seeing bare dirt, besides the oranges I just harvested, if you're seeing bare soil, that's where the acequias are. And you know, it's kind of hard to film it. I'm going to get out from behind this and just walk around a little bit and talk a little bit more. Okay, so we've sculpted these paths. I'm meandering through the garden. We've sculpted the acequias on contour, except when we want to move the water quickly. So there are some areas that are lower, just in the garden, and there are some plants that we don't want to have as much water on. So in those areas, I will put ditches that go quickly downhill, shallow downhill ditches. But in the areas that I want the water to percolate, and I want to slow it down, then that's when I do shallow ditches on contour. Also known as swales, but these aren't even swales. this is an acequia system, and this is how it works. So it's old school irrigation, and it's awesome. We love it, and we've been learning so much, and stuff did really, really well. So you can see here some water has pooled. This is just from the rain. So in the last few days, we got some really heavy rain, and all of the acequia ditches filled up and just were there for days. So instead of that rain just running off, it stayed on our land, and it percolated into the soil. And it's really enlivened everything. You know, we've got, here, I'll show you one more time. We've got some really nice sheet mulches and lots of baby plants and lots of fruit trees. And it is just a really sweet garden, and it works really well to do this acequia system. So you could mimic something like this. If you were designing an agricultural earthworks based system, then you could mimic something like this in a small section of your garden, wherever your vegetable garden is going to be. So if you store your water high on site, which is the general rule, you're going to catch the water, let's say, in a pond or off of the roof of your house. And then from there, it comes down through the keyline system, which we're going to talk about and teach you about, down into the garden. And so the key lines and the swales are in the big terraces. That's the sort of mega view of your property. But then if you get into smaller areas, like we have a very flat garden. As you see, this is not a slope. There's a very subtle slope, however, and that's why it's all that much more important to know what the slope is and where it is and what the contours are and where they are. Because we have such a small amount of slope here that we need to use what we have. And we can use what we have to either send the water off site quickly, keep the water on site, or, and I forgot to show you this when we were down there, but I'll just tell you, when at the very bottom of our site, we have a big berm that we built to keep so that once the water does all the way get down there, it goes through the whole thing, it still pools and forces everything to come back one more time and cycle through. So I mentioned source to sink. So the source is where the water comes into our property, and the sink is where it goes to the neighbors. And so the principle of cyclic opportunity and the principle of catch and store energy, which these are phrases that you'll hear in this course many times, is that every time something comes around, the opportunity for yield, cyclic opportunity, every time a resource comes around again, the opportunity for yield increases, sometimes exponentially. So every time we send water back onto our site, our opportunity for yield increases. And then to catch and store energy, that's what I'm talking about with the ponds and with source to sink. So I'm sort of mixing concepts here, but let me just be a little bit more articulate about source to sink. So the source is where the acequia comes into our property. The sink is where it goes to the neighbors. We are catching and storing that water in as many places as we can between the source and the sink. And you'll see some diagrams about this. So that go like this. So the water comes in, and it goes here, and it goes here, and it goes here, and it goes here. And that creates all this edge zone, and creates all this cyclic opportunity. And in every little nook and cranny, we're catching that water. And there's an old saying in permaculture, the cheapest place to store water is in the soil. So combined with what you're going to learn in the next module about building soil, building lots of organic matter, if you're diverting the water from source to sink as many times as possible, and you're catching and storing the energy, and you're building organic matter to increase the water holding capacity of your soil, then you are bound for success. So that is pretty much what I wanted to say about this acequia system, and to introduce you to Earthworks and welcome you to the module, and I hope you love it. It's amazing. I'm the course organizer and designer on this thing, and this module was really a challenge because we had a hard time finding a teacher who really had the resources and the time and the knowledge, and it's just a very challenging course, and there's not a lot of women in Earthworks, and so it's provoked this amazing conversation about how can we get more women in Earthworks, and so we wanted to make sure to include it in this course for y'all, but also we wanted to make sure that you got content that was useful and valid to you based on our personal experience, not just based on some woman like reading about Earthworks. So we've pulled together this faculty panel where we're each sharing little bits of expertise, and it's been really cool to watch it evolve, and just the way we've collaborated and people just taking dibs on certain sections and sharing their information. And I know you're going to love it. And we'll see you in the discussion group, and have a good time.